Welcome, everybody.
Hi,
I think
Facebook
we're
land.
officially live. Great, looks like it's working. So we today, the three of us are, well, this is true every day, but we use Chris Muse, who's down below, myself, Alyssa Marine, and Christiane Palmas, the three of us teach together in a program called the Verdant Collective, and we're also in the process of launching some programs for practitioners that will be coming soon, maybe even later this week. So stay tuned for that. But we're going to talk to you today about ethics, power, and belonging, which is a fucking beast of a topic. I mean, we could probably spend a week talking about this nonstop, not sleeping, not pausing, and not even be close to finished talking and discovering things about it, because it's so important and it's so rich, and there's so many different perspectives to take and angles to look at it. Before we really dive in, I want to let you all know that we're going to be doing these every other week. So we're going to do a Facebook Live conversation between the three of us about various as yet to be determined topics every other Tuesday at this time, 12:15 p.m. Mountain Time. You can also catch the recordings of them on our Facebook page, and they'll be on our website and on our YouTube channel, which we'll put links to in places that you'll be able to find. So they'll be around and available for you to check out. Before we start, can you two let me know if it's working on your end, that it's showing up on Facebook? Okay, great. Great.
It's been frozen, but I don't know if that's true. Okay.
So,
you're anything but frozen, Muse.
Good.
all right. So we all practice in a modality which we could call somatic sex education. We're all certified sexological body workers. We cross-pollinate with all kinds of practices and ways of working with clients and couples and groups. So we don't really do just one thing. But the thing that really has us stand apart from other modalities is the sexological bodywork and somatic sex education, because they are touch modalities that include people's entire bodies and that are oriented toward eros, sexuality, pleasure, arousal, and all kinds of other things. And somatic sex education and sexological bodywork, they're not licensed. We're not licensed practitioners in those. There's no licensure program for that. And there's no real, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's no real code of ethics that we can fall back on the way that psychotherapists, or, I mean, there is a little bit of one, but there's no regulating. There's starting to be regulating bodies to be enforcing these things, but it's in the works. It's not really well developed and robust in a way that is super supportive of the community, is my experience of it. The community of practitioners and the clients of those practitioners.
Well, let me just clarify that we're not governed by any state or federal regulatory agency the way licensing is. We're just certified. And so we have pieces of paper across the planet, across the globe, that from different institutions and schools that say we completed a training and we did it properly, and now we're out in the world. But we don't have any licensure, and we don't have any government. In some areas, this practice is illegal. In some countries, it's perfectly legal. But we don't have a top-down governing structure that tells us how, in a punitive way, in a black and white way, from outside in how we should behave. So unlike psychotherapy and massage therapy and medicine and that kind of thing, we are left to create our own structures. And so we have a couple of professional organizations that have codes of ethics. We can Google them right now, and we have codes of ethics, but we don't have to agree to practice under those codes of ethics because we don't have any top-down bodies. And that's really how most industrialized cultures work with things when it comes to codes of conduct. We tell people what to do, and then we punish them when they've done something wrong. But I think what you're getting at, Alyssa, is that we're actually in a profession, in professions that strive for a very different culture. We have a very different value system and a very different ethos. And that's largely what we're going to be exploring today, because it makes for some very interesting dilemmas.
Absolutely.
And a greater degree of personal responsibility and communal responsibility to one another, to hold each other in this living ethics that we are moving towards individually and collectively. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we really can't go to sleep at the wheel around it because there isn't something telling us. I mean, as you said, Christiane, there's a code of ethics, but it's not enforced from the top down. There aren't the structures in place for that, which is sort of a beautiful thing in some ways.
Yes.
And it can make it a really
Yes.
messy thing
Yeah.
in other ways. But we, as practitioners, the three of us, and there's others who are practicing in these modalities who I'm sure would say the same thing, are committed to doing the work required to really make sure that we are ethically practicing. And that's work that's never done. It's forever unfolding, I think, because the work changes and we come up against new situations and things change in ourselves, and it's a living, breathing conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So lately in our conversations about this, we've landed on, and this is sort of the core of our teachings, we come back to it over and over again, that everything points to belonging, or everything comes from belonging, or is us trying to get back to our sense of our belonging in the world, or to grow our belonging in the world. And so I wonder if one of you wants to just speak to what that means in this context around ethics and power.
Muse, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Well, to me, it means our sense of belonging actually becomes our compass for how we relate to ethics. So the more that we know our belonging within the communities that we're woven into within the world, and also belonging to the sense of the power structure, the differentials that we have, just our general sense of belonging, that helps us take our ethics from the inside out. So we have a sense of responsibility that our ethics begins with and lives in our own soul and our own connectivity with the larger world that we belong in. So it's less about a personal egoic experience of desire or thoughts or feelings, and it's the sense of fairness or the sense of integrity is really born out of our wellness and the attitudes around how our decisions really impact and affect the whole.
I love that, Muse. One of the things I love about what you said, to slow us down and break it down a little bit, is that you're talking about the responsibility that comes with a sense of belonging, and a sense of if I feel I belong, if I experience myself in my intrinsic belonging, what happens there is that I experience myself in my intrinsic participation, and my theoretically my right-sized participation. I'm both centered, I center myself, and I'm completely decentered, because I center the larger unfolding of which I am a part, and to which I belong, and for which I am responsible. And if I look at it that way, if I look at my belonging as a calling and as a responsibility, then I'm less likely to fall into the trap of what's in this for me, rather than what am I in, how am I participating in something vastly greater than myself, without me, which without me would not unfold in a particular way. So my belonging comes with a really strong sense of responsibility and a practical ethos, and therefore an ethics, a living ethics. And that's a thing we're not, I certainly have not been taught that. I haven't even been taught to consider the language before.
There's something about it. This is, I don't know if this is a tangent, but I was thinking about, if we're coming from this place of our ethics arising out of our belonging, out of our embedment, our undeniable, there's some other word I want to use that's not coming to me, but undeniable belonging in the human and more than human world. And if it's coming from that, when we make a mistake, because it's not like, oh, you get in touch with your belonging and then you don't have to worry about ethics anymore, because you just naturally behave in the ways that are beautiful and perfect and helpful for the community. That's so not the case. I don't think. I don't imagine.
We could aspire to it.
I don't know if we would even want to, because
Yes.
there's so much. This feels sort of risky to say, but there's so much beauty that can actually unfold in the making of the mistakes.
Yes.
And when that's happening in this rooted place of belonging, when that's not in question, when you know that even if you fuck something up, you misstep, you whatever, that you're still going to be a part of, you're still embedded in community. The people aren't going to go away. You're not going to lose your livelihood. You're more likely, this is certainly true for me, so maybe I'll speak to my own experience. When that's the case, when it's not this black and white rules sort of thing, I am onto myself much faster than when it is black and white. Like, I'm willing to look at how I'm behaving and what's happening in me when there's this rootedness in belonging. Doesn't look like this is quite making sense yet, because the stakes are different. My belonging isn't at stake. And so I'm willing to look at, like, oh, I'm sitting with this client and I'm having this thought, and I should probably talk to someone about that. I need to talk to Christiane and Muse about that now, because this is a little, I'm not quite sure about this, rather than just sort of letting it pass by.
So I just want to acknowledge that this is a whole little side thing, because I distracted you from your original point. Now that you've got us here, Alyssa, I think one of the things that feels so important to point out is that what I just heard you say is that in this version of ethics that we're talking about, that comes from wellness, it comes from participation, it comes from inclusivity, like true inclusivity, not metric inclusivity or equality inclusivity, but just you're here, therefore you are participating, therefore you belong. That actually creates a different inspiration that comes from internally versus the top-down, outside-in punishment, sort of the overlord who says, you've broken the rules, you're out. And the type of behavior, the type of practitioner that system, that industrialized patriarchal system or dominator system, creates within us, that creates a kind of looking over our shoulder, like, oh, I better not, I'm inclined to do this, but I better not do this because it's wrong. Because
or if I'm going to do it, I better hide it.
Better yet, because I can't not do it, and it's against the rules. And so there's nowhere in there does that piece of, well, what's actually best for the system of which I'm an intrinsic part. Nowhere in there does that that fuse get turned on, because I'm in a fear-based system and a black and white system. So I hear you really wisely describing that as you speak what you just spoke.
So in that, it seems like ethics becomes a more dynamic process of decision making based on our values, our internal values that we're carrying, yet not looking over our shoulder, not checking off boxes, not doing that thing that's
Right.
or that could turn out to be more performative or more like covering your ass, which can also feed and compound ideas around shame, which is so insidious in our culture. So that if we're, oh, I can't do this because the rules say that, then we can wind up in a really shadowy place that that actually undermines the healing and the space that we're holding. But with that becomes, we have to have responsibility for ourselves. We have to really know our own wounds, our own shadows, and where it is that we have liabilities, so that we can have our own eye on ourselves rather than having to, again, externally source that stuff.
Yeah, great. So I just want to pause for a second and say to anyone watching right now, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the comments on Facebook. There's a few of you in there, and a few have said short things, and it's so lovely to see you, and thank you for being here. And if you have questions, or if you have things arising in you in response to what we're saying, please do that. And if you're listening to this or watching this after the fact, you can send us an email, and we'll include that in the description of the video, so you have that there. Okay, so
Okay.
It's like, okay, what now?
Yeah, what now?
What now? So, well, this is, again, as I said at the beginning, there's no way that we can actually talk about all of this. I mean, it's sort of laughable to do. We're going to be talking for 15 more minutes about this topic, which could go on forever and ever, and needs to go on for much longer. But I want to bring in, so we've been talking about how it's problematic when we're doing ethics from the top down in this, as you've called it, Christiane, the dominator model, the patriarchal model, Western industrial, Western medical model of having this top down ethics that then is not actually an embodied living thing in you. And this has me wanting to move us in the direction of talking about power, because I sometimes see this collapse that happens when people are wanting to move away from that top down, the dominator hierarchies and programming, that then it's like, okay, it just becomes this flat land sort of thing where power is unrecognized and unclaimed, which can also be problematic in different ways. And so I wonder how we might talk about the way power functions in this other way of working, where it's not a dominator system, it's not a top-down hierarchy, but there's likely to be some kind of natural hierarchy that arises, like when we're sitting with clients. There's a power dynamic at play. Where us as the practitioner, we have more power in that context than the client because of our role. And owning that and being present to it and even bringing it into the room with the client can be absolutely essential. I mean, owning it and knowing about it is certainly essential to what we do with clients. Otherwise, things can get really screwy. So speak about those things. Go.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would say here is that I think it's fairly safe to say that for lots of folks who find themselves gravitating towards somatic sex education and sexological body work, we're coming, or maybe I'm going to go out on a limb. We'll see if we get some pushback here, that most healing modalities, that's not the word we use, but that's what most people recognize. Most healing modalities, that the folks who are drawn to those healing modalities as practitioners might actually have an experience of being disempowered, and therefore they're drawn toward a culture that is, and a profession that is designed to redistribute power, to empower people. It's folks who have, I think it's hard for folks who come through the door of feeling disempowered in their own lives to actually acknowledge that they have intrinsic power in these relationships of practitioner and client, or professional board and association members, or, you know, all these different ways that we might participate. It's hard to claim, recognize, acknowledge, and claim, and even understand the scope of the power that we have simply by virtue of being in these relationships and being practitioners. So that's the thing I would, yeah.
Just to add to that, I think there can sometimes be a fear of that truth, or of recognizing that, because we don't want to commit the same, what's the word I want to use? We don't want to hold power and abuse power the way that it was used and abused against us.
Mm-hmm.
And so there can be like, I don't want to be that, so I'm just going to completely dissociate or disconnect from that possibility as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that still gets back to the belonging piece, that if we are belonging within a system that is, you know, the individual elements just constantly interrelating and changing positions, and, you know, having multiple dances, the way we do with each other, and we do with our clients, and we do with peer supervision, and we do, you know, there's hierarchies, and then they shift, and then there's, you know, equanimity, and then it shifts. And you know, if we're not able to understand how we participate and how important our participation is, it's so much easier to just have a blinders on about the places in which we have power. We're not recognizing our intrinsic belonging.
Yeah, exactly. And in these cases, in these professional situations, we do have a role. Our belonging is actually the way that we hold the space in that particular situation. And so to diminish that, or to, you know, frame power as it's either, you know, kind of power over, or we're just sort of all equal here, sitting around, you know, we're all sort of like a pile of mush just kind of floating around, then we don't really get anywhere. So it's the client and the practitioner, nobody's more or less important, and yet we do have distinct roles. And so even when we're encouraging our clients to kind of lead, really it's around how can we have them be important, know their importance, know their belonging, and sort of bring them into their belonging, while also reflecting and pointing out, and really coming from our own place of really orienting always from the question that we love to say, who is this for? And in the case of a client practitioner dynamic, if we're as practitioners always orienting, it's to understand and prioritize their wellness, their understanding their experience, you know, their feelings, while not going anywhere, while not going away, then we're holding that space of power, but we're holding it with that beautiful responsibility that also is bringing people into their humanity. Yeah, so I think that's one of those things. And then another thing is that when we do take that seat and we're in a position of power, another thing that can happen is we can be really scared to make a mistake. I know I can. I know I've fallen into that trap, which is, again, back into that sort of egoic, it's important for me to get this right. I've got the power, and if I fuck this up, you know, oh God, it's going to be flat, or I'm going to do it wrong, or they're going to be unsatisfied, or whatever. And then there's so much empowerment that comes with, oh, okay, I didn't hit the mark there. What about this? Or, oh, I was thinking that, but I'm mistaken. Or, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that I did that or said that or whatever. then it's really empowering then for the interplay of the dynamic of humanity, shared humanity.
So I wonder, as a way of starting to wind down and realizing we've been talking about belonging and how it's really the foundation that we need to cultivate in order for all of this to arise. And I don't know that we've actually defined what belonging is. I don't know if
Muse did. Well,
Muse did?
you know, in the beginning, had a little bit of a go at it.
I would love for you to do it again.
Good.
Just so we can really highlight it, because
on this side of the conversation.
On this, because it's such an essential thing to everything that we're talking about and to our general experience as human beings. And it's something that our culture has so messed with. That's the nice way of, that's a gentle way of saying it.
Made conditional.
Sure, made conditional, and there's so many issues around it. So I wonder if we might just explore more specifically what it is and how to find our way to it.
Okay.
No?
Well, I'll yes. We're going to take 4 minutes to do that, or 2 minutes, because then we'll take 2 minutes to say goodbye. So I have a really maybe easy way in my world. It's easy way to talk about this. It's a way we talk about it quite frequently, and that's ecological belonging. And it's simply a fact. It's a fact of physics. It's empirical. We live in a system. We live in multiple systems embedded with and embedded in and overlapping with other systems. We live in an enclosed system of physics, that there is a finite amount of energy. It can neither be destroyed or created. We are participating there. That is a fact. Every single thing we do has an impact on these myriad systems to which and within which we belong, and which we are in our world, to which we're responsible. That we come from this system and will return to this system in a really intrinsic way. And the belonging as an act, as a verb, is accepting our responsibility and our place in that enclosed system, from which we get everything that allows our survival and our thriving. So I think of it as my primary partnership is my belonging in this system. And so that feels to me like, for me, that's the easiest way to think about my belonging and to check my belonging, to tune up my belonging. And Muse mentioned a compass. For me, it's the easiest way to reorient my true north if I get knocked off, which happens regularly.
Beautiful. And I think what I hear in that we come back to over and over again is that our belonging is not in question.
No.
But many of us have to do quite a bit to clear out the layers, the forgetting, the ways we've been told we don't belong, the different definitions we've been given or fed. I say fed because it's not a generous giving. It's a force feeding of all the ways we don't belong and can't be the ways that we are. And we're wrong. And, we need to be ashamed of that. And it's a big problem. And that's, it's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
And it's really what all of our work is ultimately about. And
entirely.
And so there's many paths to remembering your belonging. And we certainly can't go into what they all are right now, or maybe any of them, but just, I think of the Rumi poem, something to the effect of, don't seek love, remove all the barriers in yourself to it. And it's the same thing. You don't have to seek your belonging. You have to remove the barriers in you. That
Yes,
are preventing you from seeing that it's already there.
that's just is so important. So contrary. Just that alone is like, oh, talk about empowering.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
And even just holding that as a possibility
Yeah.
can start to shift and change how you orient to the world without even doing anything else. Just considering like, oh, I belong. If I were to actually belong here, what would I do? What would I feel? What would that look like? And just starting to even imagine that as a possibility can start to change.
Sometimes playing with the negatives is actually really helpful in the way that language can inform us and give us permission. And so sometimes even saying, what would change if I were to stop not belonging? It can be a very different versus what would change if I were to imagine I belonged. Both of them are really powerful, but for some of them, one door is more powerful than the other.
Stopped not belonging.
Yeah, if I just stopped that.
Yeah.
Because we're actively not belonging. And underneath that active not belonging, we are belonging. There is a part of us that's completely belonging and always has and always will.
All right. So with that, we'll leave you to excavate yourself. If you have questions,
what would they have questions about?
Watching this on Facebook, you can continue to post comments on the video. We'll come back and look at them and answer them in some form or another, or use them to inform future Facebook Lives that we might do. You can also email us at info@instituteforoeroticintelligence.com. Okay, great. And keep an eye out. We'll see you in 2 weeks. So our next Facebook Live is Tuesday, August 25th.
Something like that.
I believe.
Yeah. Around there.
We'll be talking about pleasure and sensation and the neurology of all of that. So we hope to see you then. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.